Hello and welcome to the BuiltOnAir podcast. BuiltOnAir is a regular podcast where we talk with everyday people and learn about the amazing things they are doing with Airtable. Today's podcast is sponsored by Openside, the leading solutions provider for Airtable customers. Check out openside.com to learn more about their products and services that can take your Airtable usage to the next level. Use promo code BuiltOnAir to receive $20 towards any product purchase.
In this episode, we chat with Jeremy Oglesby, a software developer and Airtable community leader. Jeremy recalls his experience searching for a way to simplify the data entry process for cataloging equipment for his job, and how that search led him to Airtable. Today, Jeremy is a familiar presence on the Airtable community forums, and he uses his adept knowledge to help newbies and developers alike in troubleshooting their own bases. He explains how he uses Airtable for just about anything, including scoring board game results. That's right, Jeremy walks us through an Airtable base he made to ease the game night headache of accurately reporting the winner after a game of Seven Wonders, a complex board game with so many variables in the scorecard that only a database would do. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks.
Thank you so much for being on our podcast. My number one question, how did you find Airtable?
Oh boy. So I was a teacher for several years. And while I was teaching, I was always dabbling with online technologies. I, for example, beta tested Google Classroom way back when it was first being released. And by the time I decided to leave teaching as a profession, I had gotten my own classroom about 95% paper-free. So I had converted most of my curriculum materials into digital resources for my students, and they were doing their assignments on devices for the most part. At that point, I was still pretty new to using all of these web technologies, but I left teaching and I went back into the construction industry. So I had been in the construction industry before teaching and went back working for a civil and geotechnical engineering firm. I was working in the laboratory for a long time as a laboratory technician. But eventually got promoted into the QA department. So the company already was, or at least the division of the company I was working in, did materials QA. So we were testing asphalt, concrete, aggregates, doing geotechnical analysis for construction projects. So I moved into the QA department, which the main responsibilities there was keeping equipment calibrated, keeping track of training for technicians, just making sure that our processes were operating smoothly and everything. And a big part of that was record keeping. We had 3 different organizations that were auditing us on a rotating schedule, such that we had on average 2 audits a year. And these were like 3 to 5 day affairs where we had people in our laboratory combing through our records, making sure that we were keeping everything up to date. Because, it's kind of a big deal if, we're testing the strength of concrete tilt panels used to build buildings and we aren't doing a good job of testing that concrete. That could be catastrophic for the building that gets built.
I could see that, yes.
Yeah. So we had to keep very strict records of all of our equipment, its status, all of our processes, all of the training for our technicians, making sure that they're competent at what they're doing. And when I joined the QA department, they were still keeping paper records. And so coming from having just transitioned my classroom as a teacher to being paper-free, I decided that was going to have to take place in the QA department at my company as well. So I started, this was my real first foray into programming of any kind. And they were already using Microsoft Excel. But what they did was they just built kind of forms that they could input data into, and it would do all the heavy lifting of calculations and stuff for them. And they had it formatted nicely for printing. So they would input all the information, and then they would print it and store the paper record. And they were just lining this hallway with file cabinets of records because, I mean, it's just tons and tons of records. And I was like, this is not sustainable. So the first thing I did was I started dabbling with Excel and learning how to use Visual Basic scripting inside of Excel, and converting some of those forms into little databases in and of themselves. So you'd input the data on the same page that they had before that was all formatted pretty to look like a page, like a form page.
Right.
But then I added a button that would run a script and save all the data into another sheet in that same Excel spreadsheet, and just keep those records there. But then I quickly realized, it'd be really great to have this available on the web, because we're often out in the field or out in a laboratory, so, an offsite laboratory or something, where we have to do these calibrations, or we have to test our technicians or whatever, and keep records of these things. And it'd be nice if we could do it on a tablet or on a laptop, away from our main office. And Excel just didn't work out well as a web tool for that kind of thing. So this kind of went hand in hand with, I also started learning real programming. The first thing I did was I actually built us a web application in Ruby on Rails. So learned some Ruby, learned a bit about web technologies and how to build an application, and built a pretty simple little equipment tracking database, basically, in Ruby on Rails. But I quickly realized kind of the scope of what I needed to do was it would take years, and probably would have been nice to have another developer or 6 working with me on a project.
For a whole company, that seems like you gave yourself quite a big of a task to learn Ruby, and B, come up with a usable product that you would then deploy to your company to use regularly.
Yes,
That's
and I was very lucky that my company was giving me the time and space to do that kind of thing, alongside my regular work duties. But it was at that point that I discovered Airtable, and I first heard about it on a podcast. Not this one, but I listened to various, I listened to various technology podcasts, and just heard someone mention it and how they were using Airtable to track something, and so I decided to check it out. And I didn't have any background in kind of the forerunners that delved into this field of web-based databases, or easy to use designer databases, right?
Right.
So Airtable was my first experience, and it was just eye-opening and jaw-dropping to me. I was, along with learning programming, I was still learning SQL at the time too, and realizing, I can see the parallels here between how I was building my database for my Ruby on Rails application and how I could use Airtable to build that same database in like 1/20th the time,
right,
and still have a nice user interface for the other people in my department to use. So I quickly shifted gears and started building out our equipment tracking and technician training and all of these things as databases in Airtable. And we quickly saw the value in that and expanded on it like crazy. I'm no longer with that company, but they are still using the Airtable database that I built, and still contacting me from time to time with questions on how to use it and how to improve it. So that was my first real introduction to Airtable.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and along that process too of learning how to use Airtable, I discovered the forums and became a member there, and have always enjoyed for the last few years taking on the challenges of people's questions on the forums.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's I do it in my free time. It's kind of like, you know, a relaxing thing for me, which my wife always finds strange. That I find it relaxing to try and solve Airtable challenges.
It is and it isn't.
Yeah,
I agree. And then, then I'll be up at like 1 o'clock in the morning saying, why did
yeah,
I do this to myself?
yeah. Yeah, it's always different though when it's someone else's problems, right?
That is true.
You don't feel quite the same sort of pressure to make sure that you know, make sure that it gets done at a particular time or anything like that. I can just kind of hop on the forums and contribute an answer here and there, and then be done when I feel like being done. So
Yeah, that is nice.
yeah,
I would agree. And it's helpful, obviously. So you've been in the forums for quite some time and have put in your work, as I would say. I wanted to know, and I guess since you transitioned to Airtable for that particular project, I wanted to know like the difference between originally you had your setup in Excel and you would have had to teach your coworkers how to use this new process. And then you transitioned later to Airtable. Now you have to teach them how to use that process. Well, Airtable is pretty user friendly, but there's still kind of the nitty gritty of how do you use it. How was that process like, and how many people did you actually have to coach?
I think there were about 5 people probably that I had to coach on using this database in Airtable. And yeah, I sat them down in front of a whiteboard and I taught them the basic concept of entity relationships in databases.
Mm-hmm.
And I used that language because I knew that they'd be able to pick it up. So, you know, the concept that a row in Airtable represents an instance of an entity, or a table represents a collection of entities, right? And so I taught them this concept, and the concept of the relationships, and how, so an example that I used, we built our database for calibration records for equipment, right? And so one piece of equipment will have many calibration records. And so I taught them this relationship and showed them in the database how, you know, to create this relationship by linking records, by linking many calibration records to one piece of equipment. And so now those calibration records belong to that piece of equipment, and to guard against, you know, doubling that up such that a calibration record belongs to 2 pieces of equipment, because that would be,
Right.
you know, a breach in the integrity of the data.
Mm-hmm.
And Airtable has certain guards in place for keeping that from happening, but they aren't perfect.
No, but at the time we're recording this, scripting is still kind of new as a feature, and I imagine that would make things a lot easier in
Yes.
record duplication detection and things of that nature.
Yeah. And actually, the time that I started building this database, blocks hadn't even been released yet in Airtable. That wasn't even a thing yet. And when blocks were released, I was already underway working on this. And they had the dedupe block, deduplication block, they had the chart block. And oh man, so many blocks that just met so many of my needs right then and there as I was already in the middle of this project. And it was just amazing. And now, yeah, over the last few years, I'm noticing kind of gaps. And, you know, you see a lot of people posting on the forums about, hey, it'd be really great to have this feature or that feature. And, you know, kind of starting to feel frustrated that Airtable, it feels like they're moving so slowly, right? And they're being so careful in what they're releasing and how they're releasing it. And we'd really like to see some of these features. And then all of a sudden, just recently, they dropped the scripting block on us. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, you guys have been working on a very big very important, very cool feature for quite a while now, haven't you?
Yes.
So got to hand it to them. That was amazing. And yes, I have been using the scripting block like crazy since then. Another really cool aspect of Airtable in general, and then in particular the scripting block in combination with that, is how well it serves as a safe place to kind of learn these concepts of SQL,
Yeah.
of databases and relational databases and how they work, and then scripting and programming in general. I have 3 kids, and I can already see how I'm going to use Airtable as a safe place to start learning or to start teaching them JavaScript, and for them to start learning in a safe environment with a built-in database, how they can manipulate data, how they can build little tools for themselves to accomplish what they need to accomplish. And Airtable all along served as a great learning tool for me as well while I was learning how to program and trying to understand web technologies, because it's just such a beautiful user interface, so well designed. It really helped kind of solidify the concepts in my mind of how these web tools work as I was going through this process of learning. And at the company I was at in the construction industry, with all this space that they gave me to learn programming and to build out this Airtable database, I ultimately decided that I wanted to move into the web technology sector full time, and that's what I wanted to do for a career from then on. So started looking for jobs in that space, and that's where I'm at now. I just a few months ago got a job with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Arizona as a test automation developer. So I write scripts now that test our mobile application, our Android and iOS mobile applications, writing in the C# language, and we use the Xamarin platform to build our mobile apps. And so the skills and tools that I've learned in large part through using Airtable have contributed to this ability to make a career change into web technologies, especially at my age, in my mid-30s. It's a tough process to make a career change like that.
Well, congratulations, and I'm glad you were able to do that, because I'm starting to get the itch too, but I'm not going to do it quite yet.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah. So do you want to show us something you've made in Airtable?
Yeah, sure. Man, I've used Airtable for so many things. Sometimes one-off bases that I'll build for a particular thing, like karaoke voting database when we have karaoke night with friends,
great.
or and then of course there's always the business applications too, where I've taken on clients and helped them build out a photography project management database or event management database. I've transitioned my home budgeting fully into Airtable, and in fact that was the database I was initially thinking about showing for this meeting, because that's definitely the one where I have the most going on in terms of Airtable functionality, and in particular using the scripting block quite heavily in my budgeting database. But number one, I realized it'd be really difficult to scrub the data in a budgeting database in such a way that it's safe to show it off. And then number two, a lot of your previous podcast guests have already talked about these kinds of applications, business-based, project management-based, finances. So I decided I'm going to show off something rather whimsical and fun that I built for myself, and that actually gets quite a bit of use, interestingly. So I have a database that I will show you in just a minute, where I track scoring for one of my favorite board games. So I use it to initiate a game session for this board game, and then collect scores from all of my friends who are playing with me at the end of the game. And then my database, runs the numbers and does all kinds of analysis in order to, number one, provide the winner of the game, and then number two, provide ongoing statistics for our game sessions. And in fact, my building this database, I just started, dabbling as a fun thing. But as a result of my building it kind of became an establishment in our household and among our friends, such that every Sunday going forward, we started playing this same board game. Every Sunday, we'd have friends over, they'd come over, we'd play this game, and it was just so much fun, and is so much fun to keep track of our statistics and see those numbers change every week, and be able to kind of analyze those and figure out if our strategies are working and if we're going to try something else the next time. Mm-hmm. And so I just kept building onto this base, adding more and more features to it. So the game that I built it for is called Seven Wonders.
Okay.
So we actually, we call Sundays Swan Day now, short for Seven Wonders Day. And so I actually also added some automation to my database as a way to create the game session. So I'm actually also using the Airtable API, and I'm using it in conjunction with iOS shortcuts. So that's what I'm going to show off, but this can definitely be done on Android devices too, with apps like IFTTT, Zapier, and I'm sure that Android also has some sort of JavaScript or Python scripting environments that you can install on your phone to do this kind of thing as well. But iOS shortcuts is just a really convenient, easy to use application for building out scripting flows, kind of step by step, telling your phone, hey, do this, now do this, and then take that data and do this. And you can actually use it to hit an API endpoint as well. So I've, going to grab my box lid here because I want to show you, I actually added an NFC tag to the lid of my Seven Wonders box here. Yeah. And so I can just take my phone and just swipe it on that NFC tag, and it kicks off my my shortcut for me. And so this shortcut asks me a couple questions to get the game started. What expansions do I want to play with? What game number is this for the day? So if we're playing multiple games back to back, I can label them game 1, game 2, etc. And then it pulls up a list of all my contacts that I have in my contact list, who I have tagged as players of Seven Wonders. Mm-hmm. So I'm going through this workflow now. I'm going to select myself, and I'm going to select you, Camille, as mm-hmm. players in the game. And then what it's going to do is actually send out a text message. So you should get a text message here soon.
I did.
Yeah, and it shows you what wonder you're playing. So that got randomized inside of my iOS shortcut. It randomized out of all the wonders that are available, which one you're going to be playing as. Mm-hmm. It showed me what order to put those wonders in. So it randomizes seating order as well. Okay. And then it gives you a link to view guides and stats. So these are all stored in Airtable, but I have shared views that I'm hosting on a website. And so you can go in anytime, my friends can go to this website and see their stats for all of our games of Seven Wonders that we've played. And then also in the text message, there is a link to the form to submit scores at the end of the game. So that's what I do. Whenever friends come over and we play Seven Wonders, I just have to swipe my phone on my NFC tag on the box, and it goes through this whole process of randomizing the wonders, randomizing the seating order, and then it creates the game in Airtable by hitting that API endpoint, creates a new game record. So now I'll show you the database here.
Sure. I'm Stonehenge B, by the way.
Oh, okay. And I'm playing Giza, the pyramids of Giza, side B. Look at that. My API endpoint didn't actually hit this time around. That does happen from time to time. But what it does is it would create a new game record here. So there'd be a row with no scorecards yet. And then I have this view where I'm singling out the current game that I've just created. So it filters to show I have a formula that is filtering out all the other games, so only the most recently created one shows. And that way, when my friends go to submit their scores through the form, they only have the one game to select from to attach their scorecard to. So they actually select that game as a linked record inside the form, and it links it to this most current game. So that a way to ensure that all of our scorecards are being attached to the same game for proper comparison. So then over in the scores table, this is where all the scorecards get submitted to. And so the player will select their name. I have everyone's names in a database also in a players table here. They'll select their name, they'll attach it to the game, they'll select what wonder they played, because we keep statistics on how well the wonders are doing, in addition to how well the players are doing. And then there's various expansions. And so one of those is leaders. So they'll attach the leaders that they played with. And then they'll go through and fill in all of their scores that they got throughout the game. Seven Wonders is a pretty, it takes a lot of effort to score the game at the end. You have to do a lot of counting of this type of card and that type of card and how much money you have and all these things. And so I try to make it as easy as possible to go through and score these things. I try to remove as much of the mental math as possible. So for example, one of the things that at the end of the game is you get 1 point for every 3 gold that you have. So instead of asking the players, how many points did you get from gold? I just ask them, total up your gold for me. How much gold do you have at the end? And put that number in. That's much easier than trying to total it up and then divide by 3 and round down to the nearest whole number there. And so they just put it in their coin total, and then I do the math to figure out what their points are from coins. Even more complicated than that is the science area, where based on the number, there are 3 different symbols for science that you can build that kind of represent the scientific advancement of your civilization that you're building throughout the game. And based on the number of each one that you have and the combinations of the kinds of symbols that you have, your score will be different. And so you have to do some math there to figure out what your score is. And so I handle all of that math in a pretty big formula. I wrote the formula out in a code editor, and making a line for each new statement, like an if statement or a mathematical comparison or whatever. I do a new line, and in the code editor, this formula comes out to over 200 lines. So it's a pretty big, it's a pretty big formula that has to do all the math to try and figure out what is the best score that this player can have out of the science symbols that they have. It's kind of complicated too, because there are some wildcard symbols in there. So the player can have a wild card and they can turn that into any symbol that they want, whichever one gets them the most points. And so I do all of that in an algorithm for them, figuring out which symbol would get you the most points out of this wild card. So they don't have to do that math anymore. My algorithm does it for them. And then at the end of all that, of course, it spits out a final score. And then back in the games table, I have formulas that are comparing all those scores, ordering the players. You see here, I single out the winner in a roll-up, and I have to do quite a bit of passing data back and forth in lookups and roll-ups between the scores table and the games table. So we single out the winner, and then I order the second place through last place. So that's the other thing, is there's a variable amount of players It could be anywhere from 2 players to 8 players in the game. And so I have to figure out in the process how to only, get the number of players that I need, how to only make the right number of comparisons, only output the right number of lines in these text output formulas that I have. So there's just a lot of work going on behind the scenes. You see in my...
I was going to say, I can't help but notice you have 62 hidden fields.
Yes. So yeah, like I have to take, for example, a scores roll up where I roll up all the scorecards that came in. And then I have to actually splice each score off from those scorecards. And, it's been so long since I built this that I can't remember exactly why I had to do it this way. And I'm sure the scripting block could take care of a lot of this stuff for me now. But of course, I've already got this built the way I need it. So I'm not going to go in and, re-engineer it if it's working right now. But yeah, I have to splice off each score and then take the remainder and splice off the next score, take the remainder, splice off the next score. And then put all of those in a ranking order. And then I also actually have to make a comparison if there happens to be a tie between the first place, for first place, if there's a tie between 2 people, actually for any place, the next thing that gets compared is your total coin, your total gold in the game. So I actually have to make a comparison there too. And actually, I got quite a bit of help through the forums from some other very genius Airtable users as I was building this out and trying to figure out how to get all of this done. And so one of the things that I came up with the help of another Airtable user was to actually just tack a player's total coin score on as a decimal to their point score, so that I can just make a straight comparison, your point dot coin total as a sort of, as a decimal number. So whoever has the most coin is going to come out on top anyways in that comparison.
Right.
And then when I go to display those scores, I just format it such that the decimal doesn't show. And then I can pull off the coin total again. So you see in parentheses next to the player's name here, I have in the display, I have their point total, their name, and then their total coin score next to their name in parentheses. So I can display all of that information. A fun little thing before I actually had the text message that went out with the link is I had this QR code that I made for the link to the scorecard. So I could just pull that QR code up on my phone and hold it out and have everyone scan it to pull up the form to submit their scores. Now I do all of that with the automation through the text message. I also pass a bunch of information, a bunch of data back to the players table as part of this game. I pass back their score, their coin total, and also how many points they scored in each of the categories. So there's all these different categories as you're building your civilization through the game: military, culture, science, your cities. So I pass all of that information back into the players table, where I have all of these statistics.
Oh my goodness.
So there's all these points from military. What percentage of the points that you've earned across all of your games have come from military points? What percentage have come from coin? What percentage have come from your wonder board? And it's fun to see all of these statistics and to go, oh, like I went military heavy that game and it didn't turn out so well. So maybe I'll try more science next time, or maybe I'll try a little bit more of a balance next time instead of trying to invest heavily in one thing. And it's just so much fun to see those things. So I pass all that data back to the players table, and then again, analyze it all and pull it back into the games table to display the players' statistics. These are statistics across all games. And so after a player has submitted their their scorecard through the form, I have it redirect to this shared page where they can see the scores coming in. They have to refresh the page every now and then as players are submitting their scores, but they can see updated rankings of how everyone did in the game. And then they can also see these kind of score or these statistics that they've been accruing across all their games. So they can see their win percentage going up or down. They can see their success rate, which is a factor of where you placed among the number of players in the game. So if you're playing a 6-player game and you ranked in the middle, you're going to have a 50%. Actually, I guess you can't be right in the middle in a 6-player game, but you get the point. You'll have a success rate based on where you placed in the game. And so you see these numbers kind of growing, changing, morphing every time we add a game to the list. And then you can kind of see also where across all of your games, where have you gotten your most points? Where do you tend to focus? And it's just so much fun to see this, so much fun such that, like I said, we kind of, this kind of became an established institution in our home that we have friends over and we play Seven Wonders. We add more statistics to the database.
I have to ask, has anyone accused you of cheating, fudging these numbers?
Not seriously, no.
Okay.
We always joke, of course, that I could go in and change things at any time if I wanted to, but so could my wife.
Fair enough.
Yeah. No, they trust me to be the keeper of the data. It all works out. In terms of blocks too, I've got 2 blocks here. So I've got a block for the current game scores. So as it's a chart block and just a bar graph, and as the scores come in, you can see someone else's up. There's Kristen's score. There's Robin's score. Up there's Jeremy's score, and it's kind of a visual comparison of who scored the most points in the game. So just another way to see the scores coming in for the current game. But then there's also this page designer block where I've used the page designer in combination with a leader print pages. So leaders, I don't want to go too much into detail here, but it's part of the game where you can recruit leaders and they have a particular effect in your civilization. And there are so many of them. You can see there's 62 leader cards. And all the leader card has on it is a little symbol that represents the effect that leader has. And so it can be hard to keep those symbols straight and remember, what does that symbol mean? What does this leader actually do in the game? So I put together this table where I describe what effect that leader has. And then I also give a little suggestion of what age it's best to play that leader in. The game is played throughout over the course of 3 ages. And some leaders are better early on, some leaders are better later, some of them it doesn't matter, or it depends. And then also another fun thing about Seven Wonders is the fact that it's a historically based game. And so all of these leaders are actual characters from history, people from history who are prominent for some reason or other. And so I put a little bio for each, almost all of the leaders in the game. So all of this is hosted in a shared view up on the website that I talked about earlier. And so people can go and see all of this information about the leaders in the game. And then I also linked all of these leaders to a leader pages table for a page 1, page 2, front and back side of this leaders reference sheet that I built in the page designer block, where I'm just pulling in all of the linked leader records from this field here, which I didn't actually rename because I was only using this.
It's fine.
Using this table real quick to pull them in to organize this into a 2-page thing, because you can see 62 leaders would not fit on a single printed out 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper.
Sure.
So I have page 1 and page 2 of this thing where all of the leaders are listed out along with a description of the effect that they have.
That's really clever. One of the most requested features is multi-page page designer pages, or to
Right.
be able to
Yeah.
print a page designer description
Right.
over the course of many different pages. And this is a very good way to do that.
Yeah, it
That's
was,
cool.
yeah, just a little workaround because I, of course, hit that problem that so many other people have hit. Where like, I need this spread across 2 pages, but
Hmm.
the page designer block is, it's really well designed for creating 1 page. But if you need to go beyond that, you hit that limitation. So yeah, I just created another table, and it, of course, did take some manual organizing here, where I had to decide how many leaders to put on the first page, right? So
Yeah.
I linked them in alphabetical order, and had to rearrange them, get them all arranged properly. But yeah, the end result is that as as a record in this leader print pages table, I have all of the leaders that I want to show up on this particular page, and then all the leaders that I want to show up on the page too. And then I printed these several of these off two-sided, so that it's just a one-sheet reference, a one-page reference that players can use, and laminated them and stuck them in my game box.
I love that they're laminated.
Yes, of course. I am that kind of a board game nerd.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's my Seven Wonders tracking database, and I've got some other tables in here where I'm playing around with some ideas. It's possible to play the game in teams if you have an even number of players, and
Okay.
so I've been kind of toying with trying to figure out how I could adapt this to allow for team scoring. I haven't quite gotten that to work yet. Um, I've also attached all the rule books in here, and I have these in a shared view so that all my friends can easily get to the rule book to reference something if they need to. There are some quick references for all those symbols that I was talking about that are in the game that are on the cards. And so if you forget what a symbol means and someone else is using the physical rule book at the table, you can always just hop onto my website real quick on your phone and pull up the rule book that you need to see and find the symbol that you're wondering about.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, that's my Seven Wonders database. Totally whimsical, totally fun, but we use it a lot.
Yeah, I can see that. I couldn't imagine trying to do all of the scoring after each game and not have your guests be just pins and needles for 20 minutes or however long it would take to pull in all of these different variables and factors and things. So, an excellent example of I have this thing that I want to do. What is
Yeah,
the best way to do it? And the answer being a database.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Like I said, I use Airtable for so many other things too. We recently started using it for we actually my wife and I homeschool, and so we've been doing the homeschool thing since well before this pandemic, and now
Yeah.
everyone is doing the homeschooling. But so we've been using Airtable for organizing our homeschool work, and allowing our daughter to get in and mark off her assignments as done. So we'll, put in all the information. We can attach any documents that she needs, and then she can just go through a checklist for the day to get all of her work done. So for all those people that are out there listening during this coronavirus pandemic of 2020 and needing a solution for organizing your work at home, your schoolwork, this is a great solution. We use it for meal planning. Camille,
Yep.
I know you've built a meal planning database that
I
you've got shared up
did.
on the universe. And I think it's quite possible that we used your meal planning database as the starting point for
Hey.
for customizing our own. So definitely recommend people go to the universe, to Airtable Universe, and check out what's there, because there's a lot of great starting places for solutions for just all kinds of workflows that you might need.
I would agree. And especially since now more and more additions to the universe include pre-made scripts. And so you might not even have to search for that kind of component separately. Thank you so much for being here and for showing your incredible bass. I hope you're still able to play with your friends despite the world being weird. Hopefully you can just use video chat, and because you have an Airtable, everyone still has access to everything that they need, hopefully, maybe.
Yeah, we've definitely had to make some changes in the way we do our board game nights, but yeah, we're still playing, still having fun.
Good.
Thank you so much for having me on. It was fun to have this opportunity to share how I'm using Airtable, and encourage all of your listeners to explore and yeah, like you said, whatever that idea is that you have, I'd really like to be able to track this. I guarantee you can find a way in Airtable to make it work, and probably to do far more than you thought you could with Airtable and automation and whatnot. So yeah, thank you. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks.